Montana Territory, spring of 1882. The day Adelaide Foster hitched her skirts and ran from her past was the same day the wind carried the scent of new rain across the plains. She did not look back. Not when her boots slipped in the muck behind the livery stable. Not when the freight wagon she'd bribed a ride on rolled out of Deer Ridge before dawn. And not even when the driver muttered, "You sure you want to get dropped at a place like that?" as he pointed to a small cabin barely visible through the cottonwoods. "Yes," she said. "I do." She climbed down, adjusted the canvas bag slung over her shoulder, and took in the quiet land. There was a barn, rough-hewn and weathered silver. A corral with a single chestnut mare. A windmill turning slow in the breeze. And the house itself modest, sturdy, and clean. A man stepped onto the porch with a rifle in hand and a cautious look in his eyes. He was tall. Not as tall as her, but close. Broad-shouldered, with dark blonde hair that curled at the nape, and a jaw that looked like it had taken and won a few fights. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, forearms tanned and dusted with trail dirt. "You lost?" he asked. "No," she said, lifting her chin. "You placed an ad in the Butte Ledger last month. Man seeks wife. Must be strong, honest, and willing to work the land." I answered it. He blinked once, then lowered the rifle. "You're Adelaide Foster?" "I am." He looked at her again, closer this time. Not the way men usually looked at her, like they were trying to measure how much taller she was than them. He looked like he was trying to understand something. "I'm Porter Callahan," he said. "Didn't expect you so soon. Didn't expect you to be real," she said back. He laughed, short and surprised. She stepped forward, her boots crunching over dry grass. "Is the offer still good?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." She exhaled then, the kind of breath a person only lets out when they have been holding it for years. Porter showed her around. The house had 2 rooms. A small kitchen with a hand pump for water. A fireplace that still held the heat from his morning coffee. No frills, no fine linens, no piano in the corner like the boarding house she had been raised in. But it was clean, safe, quiet. He poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her without a word. She took it with both hands and sat at the table. "You ran," he said after a while. "I did," she said. "Bad man. Worse family." He nodded like that made sense. Then he said, "I meant what I put in that ad. I am not looking for someone to cook for me and stay quiet. I want a partner, someone who wants to plant roots. I have land, and I want to build something real on it." She looked him in the eye. "I am not small. I am not soft. I have never been easy to love." He reached across the table and touched her hand. "Just once. Just enough." "I do not want easy," he said. "I want honest." She swallowed hard. That night, she slept in the small room off the kitchen. She kept her bag close and her boots by the bed just in case. But the wind through the shutters was gentle and the house did not creak with ghosts. The next morning, she was up before dawn. She found Porter in the barn, feeding the mare. "You said you needed help with the fence line," she said, rolling up her sleeves. He looked her over. Her hands were rough from years of work. Her height matched his when she stood straight. And her eyes, brown and steady, did not flinch. He handed her a hammer. "Let's get started." By noon, they had replaced 17 posts. She worked like someone who had never been allowed to stop before. He watched her from the corner of his eye, how she tied her hair back with a strip of cloth, how she squinted against the sun but never complained. They sat under the cottonwood for lunch. He offered her half his bread and salted pork. She took it and leaned back against the tree. "You always work this hard?" he asked. "I always had to," she said. "I was raised in my uncle's boarding house. My cousin said I scared off all the suitors. Said I would never find a man taller than me or strong enough to stand beside me." Porter chewed for a moment. "They were wrong." She glanced at him, surprised. "I had a fiancé once," he said. "Years ago. She left. Said I was too quiet. Too slow to speak." Adelaide smiled faintly. "I like quiet." He looked at her then. really looked. Me too. That night, he made stew with beans and bits of smoked beef. They ate by the fire. She told him about her mother, long gone. About the years she had spent trying to make herself smaller. How it never worked. He told her about his father, who died breaking a wild stallion. About the land he had bought with every cent he had saved. About how he was tired of being alone. When the fire died low, she stood. "I want to stay," she said. "If you still want me here?" He stood too close now, the heat between them not just from the fire. "I do," he said. She hesitated, then stepped forward. She placed her hand on his chest, right over his heartbeat. He wrapped his arms around her, not careful, not hesitant, but sure. "You are not too tall for me," he said against her hair. "I know," she whispered, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe it. The next week brought late frosts and sun that warmed only the topsoil, but Adelaide kept her hands in the earth anyway. She learned the feel of Porter's land through her palms, how the wind moved through the cottonwoods in the late afternoon, how the soil turned darker near the creek, where he said he meant to plant potatoes and carrots. She didn't ask why he hadn't yet. Some things a person waited to explain. Most mornings they worked in near silence. Her sharpening fence tools on the porch while he sawed cedar for a chicken coop. On the 6th morning, she wiped her hands on her apron and looked up at him. "You always mean to build a coop and never get to it?" Porter straightened from where he was measuring a plank against the frame. "Had one 2 winters ago. Coyotes tore it up. I never replaced it." She brushed her hair back with the back of her hand. "You planning to lose this one, too?" "No," he said, and the way he looked at her then made her stomach clench, low and warm. "Not planning to lose anything I've got now." That night, she stitched a new sack for seed potatoes by lamplight while Porter read aloud from a book about irrigation ditches he'd borrowed from the county agent in Miles City. His voice was low, careful, like he was used to reading to no one but himself. She said nothing, just worked her needle steady through the flour sack fabric. When he stopped, she set the stitching down. "You always talk like it's just you and the land." He folded the page and looked at her. "It's been that way a long time." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "You ever think it could be more?" His voice stayed quiet. "I've thought about it every day since you stepped off that wagon." The next morning, she found an old washtub behind the barn. She hauled it to the back stoop, filled it half full from the pump, and set it out to warm in the sun. When he came around the corner with an axe slung over one shoulder, he paused. "You making laundry day official?" "I'm making this place livable," she said. "That shirt you wore yesterday could stand up on its own." He laughed, and it came easier this time. By midday, she'd hung 2 lines of wash between the barn and the house, and his shirts fluttered like signals to the open sky. He came over and handed her a tin cup of water. "You ever stop moving?" "Not unless I fall asleep standing up." He sat beside her on the stoop. "You got any family still looking for you?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "No. My uncle passed last winter. My cousins married and scattered. None of them wrote to me. I don't think they meant to." Porter nodded. "Then no one's coming to take you back?" "No," she said. "No one's coming." That evening, a storm rolled in quick from the west. Porter ran to the barn to check the mare's stall while Adelaide gathered the wash from the line. Rain hit the roof like thrown stones, and the wind shoved at the walls. She had just latched the shutters when the door opened and Porter stepped in, dripping. "Roof held," he said, shaking off his coat. "Good," she said. "Because I'm not patching it in the dark." He peeled off his boots and hung his coat near the hearth. "You're not afraid of storms?" She looked at the window, where lightning flashed beyond the trees. "They don't scare me. They just remind me how small we are." He stood beside her, close enough that she felt the heat from his arm. "You don't feel small to me." She turned to him, her voice low. "You don't make me feel like I have to be." Porter reached for her then, slow and sure, his hand resting just above her waist. She didn't flinch. She let herself lean slightly into him, her cheek near his collarbone, where his shirt still smelled faintly of cedar and wind. "I've been thinking," he said. "That's dangerous." I want you to have the front room. She drew back enough to look at him. Why? It gets better light. And I want you to have the space to make it yours. Not just sleep in it. Adelaide searched his face. You're not trying to put distance between us? His thumb brushed the edge of her sleeve. No. I'm giving you a place that's yours, because you've never had one. But if you want to stay in mine, I won't stop you. The storm rolled on above them, but inside the house everything was still. She nodded once. All right, but I'll be moving my boots in tomorrow. He smiled. Good. They stood there until the thunder faded and the rain softened to a hush against the eaves. Neither moved. Neither felt the need to fill the silence. They had work to do in the morning and they both knew it. But tonight she would sleep in a home that was starting to feel like it remembered her shape. And he would lie in the next room, knowing she was there, solid and sure as a fence post sunk deep in good earth. By late April, the creek thawed enough for planting, and Adelaide learned the rhythm of Porter's land by the sound of his boots on the porch boards just before dawn. She rose with him each morning, never needing to be called. Days fell into quiet patterns measured, not dull, and with each one, the cabin began to feel less like a stranger's house and more like something she had a hand in shaping. They worked side by side without needing to fill the space between them with idle talk. He showed her how to notch rows with the hand plow, and she taught him how to twist twine from flax stems to bind stakes for the peas. One afternoon, she caught him watching her hands as she worked. You ever wonder, he said, if we would have found each other if I hadn't placed that ad? She didn't look up from where she was driving a stake into the soil. I wonder if I would have had the nerve to answer if I'd waited another week. He leaned on the handle of the spade. Why did you? I didn't want to see what I'd turn into if I stayed. She stood and wiped her palms on the back of her skirt. I didn't want bitterness to get its roots in me. He nodded, slow and thoughtful. You've got grit that's not loud. I've never known anyone like that. She turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. And you're not afraid of quiet. Most men feel it like they're afraid of being alone with themselves. I've had enough years to get used to myself, he said. Now I'm trying to get used to you. She stared at him for a moment, then gave a small nod and walked toward the house. He followed without speaking. Inside, she pulled a tin of lard from the pantry shelf and set to kneading dough for biscuits. Porter stoked the stove without being asked. They moved around each other easily now, as if they'd been doing it for years. As the biscuits baked, she stood with one hand braced on the counter and watched the window. I've been thinking about putting in a root cellar, she said. Behind the shed where the slope drops. He folded his arms and leaned against the wall. You planning on staying through winter then? I wouldn't be digging a cellar if I wasn't. The room went still. The only sound was the soft hiss of flame under the stoveplate. Porter stepped forward, slow and careful as if testing a patch of thin ice. You want it to stay like this? You and me working the land, sharing meals, sleeping under the same roof. She turned, lifting her chin. I do. But not as your hired help. You never were. He took another step, close enough now that she could smell the soap he used, plain lye, faintly sharp. She recognized the way his shoulders tensed under his shirt, like a man bracing for something real. I've been waiting until it felt right to ask, he said, voice roughened by something deeper than nerves. But I'd like to make it official. I'd like you to be my wife. She didn't answer right away. She looked at his hands, the dirt still under his nails, the small scar that ran across the knuckle of his right thumb. Then she looked him in the eye. Do you know what you're asking? She said. I'm not going to become someone else to fit into a marriage. I wouldn't ask you to, he said. I want you just as you are. I want to build this life with you, not around you. She stepped closer and rested her palm against his chest. I want that too, she said. He didn't rush to kiss her. He just leaned his forehead against hers, breath warm between them, and let the moment stretch long and quiet. Then she pulled back and nodded toward the oven. Biscuits are done. He laughed, low and quiet. Let's eat, then. We've got a cellar to plan. That night, she moved her few belongings into the front room. Not because she needed more light, but because she knew now her place was here, by choice and by invitation. Porter built a small cedar box for her sewing things without being asked. She left half the pegs by the door empty so he'd know she wasn't trying to take over the space, just share it. Outside, the wind moved through the grass with a sound like water over stone. Inside, the fire burned low, steady, and sure. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future felt like something they'd already begun to shape with their own hands. The first Sunday after Adelaide and Porter wed, the wind shifted from the north, carrying with it the last bite of winter. The sky was pale and clean, and the ground firm enough to walk without sinking at each step. Adelaide stood just outside the barn, her fingers wrapped around a small iron rake. She was watching the hen Porter had bartered for 2 days earlier, a red-laced Wyandotte that strutted through the straw like she knew what she was about. "You're naming her, aren't you?" Porter asked as he came up behind her, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She's got a mind of her own," Adelaide said. "Seems wrong not to call her something. You name her, she'll stop laying," he teased. "Mark my words." "I'll risk it," she said, then tilted her head. "You ever think about keeping more stock?" He leaned against the post beside her. "I have. Now that there's someone here who knows what to do with them." She glanced at him sidelong. "I've looked after chickens. Doesn't make me a stockwoman. Doesn't make you not one either," he said. They stood there a while, watching the hen peck at the ground with determination. Then Porter nodded toward the trail that led through the cottonwoods. "Reverend Albright rides through once a month. Does a circuit between here and Fallon. He'll be through next Sunday." Adelaide looked down at her hands, then back at him. "You want to do a church wedding?" "I want to stand beside you in front of whoever's watching," he said. "Not because I need their blessing. Because I want you to know I don't hide things." She studied him for a long moment. "I'd like that." He gave a small nod, then turned back toward the house. "We'll need to tell the neighbors. Might be a good time to meet some of them." That afternoon, they hitched the wagon and rode east to the Quimby homestead, 1.5 miles over the ridge. The Quimbys were older, a couple who'd lived on that stretch for over 20 years. Porter had traded fence wire with them once, but hadn't visited since the autumn frost. When they arrived, Nora Quimby met them at the gate, her apron dusted with flour. She eyed Adelaide up and down, then smiled with something like relief. "Well, I'll be," she said. "Porter Callahan, you finally come to your senses." Porter tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Nora turned to Adelaide. "He's been too long alone. You've done a good thing, saying yes to him." Adelaide stepped forward, steady and tall. "I didn't do it out of pity." Nora laughed. "Didn't think you did. Come in, both of you. I've just set bread to rise." Inside the house, the walls were lined with shelves and soft with quilts. Adelaide sat across from Nora while the older woman poured coffee into thick mugs. "You'll find it's different out here," Nora said, not unkindly. "Women don't get to be just one thing. You'll nurse calves and mend trousers and still be expected to smile through a run of bad weather." "I didn't come here to be just one thing," Adelaide said. Nora looked pleased by that. Porter and George Quimby talked repairs and rain patterns while the women discussed the coming Sunday. Nora offered to bring a pie. Adelaide offered to make bread. They agreed on both. As they rode back, the sun dipped low and gold behind them. "She likes you," Porter said. "I wasn't asking for that." "I know." "That's probably why she does." They passed the creek just as a pair of ducks lifted off from the bank. Adelaide leaned forward slightly, watching them disappear into the light. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked. Porter kept the reins steady. "I think about what's right in front of me, but I suppose I've started picturing more." She didn't reply right away. Then, "I could see children here. Someday. Not rushed." He turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. "Someday suits me fine." That night, Adelaide sat by the hearth mending a torn flour sack. Porter was at the table, carving a handle for a new hoe. The room was quiet save for the soft rasp of his blade and the thread pulling through canvas. He didn't look up when he spoke. "I can build you a bigger cupboard if you want it. Something with more room for preserves." "I'd like that," she said, glancing over. "But only if you let me help." He finally looked up. Wouldn't have suggested it if I didn't want that. She set her stitching aside and crossed to him. He didn't reach for her, but he didn't need to. She stood behind him, resting her hands on his shoulders, and he leaned back slightly into her touch. They stayed like that for a long moment, the fire casting slow shadows across the floor. Outside, the land stretched quiet and sure, the wind moving soft through the cottonwoods. Inside, they had begun. Not just a marriage, but a life built slowly, corner by corner, with hands that no longer worked only to survive, but to shape something worth keeping. By late May, the ryegrass along the edge of the fields had gone high in gold, and Adelaide's skirts brushed against it as she walked the fence line with a small knife in hand, trimming away the wild vines that threatened to tangle the posts. The work was slow and close to the earth, and she welcomed it. There was something steadying about coaxing order from the tangle. Porter called from behind her. "You've got company." She turned and saw Nora Quimby making her way up the path, a small basket tucked beneath one arm and a faded bonnet tied loosely under her chin. "I brought gooseberries," Nora said, holding the basket out. "Enough for a pie if you don't mind the stems." Adelaide took them with a nod. "I'll make something of them." Nora's eyes passed over the barn, the smoke from the chimney, the neat stack of kindling by the door. "This place suits you," she said. "You've made it yours." Adelaide didn't answer right away. She led the older woman toward the porch, wiping her hands on her apron as they walked. "You ever think about teaching?" Nora asked as they Saturday. "There's no schoolhouse out here, not for 20 miles. A few of us have been talking about gathering the children once a week. Reading, sums, penmanship." Adelaide folded her hands. "You think I'm the sort for that?" "I think you're the sort who doesn't flinch when something needs doing," Nora said. "And the children could use a woman who's not afraid of hard truths." Adelaide looked toward the shed, where Porter was sharpening blades. "I'd have to speak with him." "I did," Nora said. "He said it was your choice." That night, Adelaide brought it up as they sat outside. The wind was soft, and the moon sat low over the grasslands. "I don't know if I've got the patience for children," she said. Porter pushed his hat back and looked at her. "You've got a way of speaking that makes people listen. That's more than most teachers start with." "I wasn't taught like that myself," she said. "Most of what I know I learned by watching." "Then you'll teach them to do the same," he said. "If it's something you want." She nodded slowly. "It might be." A week later, the first gathering took place in the Quimbys' hayloft, swept clean and lined with planks for benches. 5 children came, ranging from lanky boys with sunburned necks to a girl no more than 6, her hands folded neat in her lap. Adelaide stood before them with a slate in one hand and a piece of chalk in the other. Her voice was calm, her pace even. She didn't speak down to them. She asked questions that made them think. By the end of the hour, even the quietest child had spoken. When she returned home, her hands and skirts dusted with straw, she found Porter waiting with a bowl of water and a cloth. "How'd it go?" he asked, holding the bowl steady as she washed. "They listened," she said. "Even when I thought they wouldn't." One of the boys asked where ink came from. He smiled. "What did you tell him?" "That it came from a root and a bit of ash, and that knowing how to make it was the first step toward writing something worth reading." He took her damp hand in his and dried it with the cloth, slow and careful. "There's something I've been meaning to do," he said. She raised her brows. He reached into the inside pocket of his vest and brought out a narrow band of braided leather. At its center sat a small oval of polished turquoise. "I made it the winter before I met you," he said. "Didn't know what it was for, only that my hands needed to make something steady. I think now I was waiting to give it to someone who'd understand how long it took to get here." She held out her hand without a word, and he slipped it over her wrist. That night, they moved together not out of newness, but out of something earned. Her fingers found the curve of his back, the rough place where years of work had shaped him. His mouth pressed into the hollow of her collarbone, slow and reverent. In the dark, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. The land settled into summer with long days and shorter shadows. Adelaide divided her time between the fields, the house, and her small gatherings with the neighbor children. Porter built her a writing desk from pine, its surface smooth and wide enough for her books and slates. When she wasn't using it, he sometimes sat there too, carving small things he never named. In late June, they rode into Miles City together for supplies. Adelaide chose fabric for curtains without asking permission. Porter bought a new plane for smoothing wood and handed it to her as they left the store. "You'll need it for the desk drawers you'll want," he said. They stayed the night in a small room above the general store, the window open to the sound of wagons and far-off fiddles. Lying beside him in the narrow bed, Adelaide traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "I used to think I'd always be waiting," she said, "for someone else to name what I was worth. I don't feel that way anymore." He turned toward her, brushing her hair back with one hand. "You've never belonged to someone else's measure," he said. "Least of all mine. You just belong here. With me." She kissed him then, slow and certain. Years passed and the land held steady. Adelaide's lessons grew into something more regular, and each week more children came. Porter built a small structure beside the house, part woodshed, part schoolroom. They kept livestock enough for their needs, and the garden flourished under her careful hands. There were hard years, too. A dry season that cracked the earth. A storm that took down the windmill. But nothing that bent them too far. Nothing they didn't weather together. They never spoke in grand declarations, but their days were full of quiet proof. A basin of water left warm by the fire. A coat mended before the chill set in. A hand reached for in the dark. In the evenings, they sat by the hearth, the firelight soft on their faces. Sometimes she read aloud, her voice low and certain. Sometimes he carved small figures from scraps of wood, placing them on the mantel one by one. And always, when the night grew still, they found each other. Not out of habit, but because love, when built right, does not dim. It deepens. They lived long on that land and well. And when people passed by, they'd see the house with its wide porch and the light in the window, and say, "That's the Callahan place. Strong people live there, built their life with their own hands." And it was true, every word of it.